Please welcome on stage our today's guest, Florian Kandler. It's always the best part, sitting down. So, give you a very nice image of Florian on the side. So, Florian, yeah, actually, we talked about it, and you want to get this one question I always ask. Please tell us a bit of where do you come from, where did you grow up, and what is your backstory? What's backstory Florian Kandler?
Absolutely. Happy to do that. But before I do that, I'd like to break protocol.
Oh my God, no.
And I want to put the spotlight back on you, because I don't know if everybody knows that Dietmar is not only an entrepreneur, successful entrepreneur himself, but he's the guy who brought this global format of Startup Grind to Vienna. And he's running it ever since a year ago. He really started putting out great events with great speakers and being very, repeating this over and over and doing a good job. And I think this is one of the traits of a good entrepreneur, to be persistent and keep doing good things. So I want to thank you, and also Hannes. I want to put the spotlight on him as well, who is running sound, light, and camera and everything in the background. Without him, we would be sitting in the dark.
He could do the Oscars alone. It's like amazing.
Exactly. A round of applause for you is very much due. And actually, Hannes and I, we met some years ago in Silicon Valley when we were both out there working and pushing our startups and getting to know investors, working on our businesses and downloading a lot of knowledge from the very experienced entrepreneurs out in Silicon Valley. And that time over there, I spent 6 months in that year over there. You spent a similar amount there. It's something that I can really recommend to everybody, and we can go into detail more on that.
Oh, we will. We definitely will.
But circling back to your question, how did it all start for me personally, so to say?
Now I'll break you quickly. The two people over there is 2 spots in here if you want to have a seat. Go ahead and grab a seat, and then it's your go.
All right.
Tell us a bit.
So, of course, I knew that you like to start with that question. So I actually did some,
You did a pitch.
I did some research in my back of my brain, because I'm so old, there are so many memories. But what I tried to figure out is what were maybe some of the experiences that I had in my life early on, or how far back do I find memories of situations, people I met, stuff that happened to me that somehow shaped and formed my path, that made me end up being an entrepreneur today. And actually, there are quite a few things that happened early on. So some stuff when I was still a teenager or a kid, so before college, some stuff that happened during college and after. And maybe the earliest thing I recalled that really got me in touch with or triggered my business brain, or where I had to think like a business person, was way back when I was still very young and I got eligible to get pocket money. And my dad didn't just hand it out to me and said, well, we decided you get this and that much and you get it every week or every month. But he said, Florian, next week I want to sit down with you and you are supposed to come up with a budget, with a plan. What do you want money for? What do you want to spend it on? Think about this and we'll negotiate.
So you did your first pitch for your pocket money.
Exactly. So my first investor was my dad, so to say. No, but... and
what was the valuation?
Good question. I don't know, but I don't know. But of course, it wasn't this super tough negotiation thing. But he just started triggering this thought, and from very early on, so to say, I was raised with the mindset: money isn't for free. I mean, think about what you want to spend it on, where it comes from, and of course, I wrote down, on a piece of paper, okay. Once a month, I want to go and see a movie in the movie theaters. Okay, then every other day, 2 pieces of candy in the school cafeteria, right? And then, okay, I want to do sports. So like once a week, play badminton. I need some money for renting the court. So I really had to think this through and then defend it somehow. And then my dad would say like, candy? That much candy? Are you sure? Isn't that bad? So it was he pushed me into a situation thinking about economic things, and that was really early on, and I found that interesting, and in some way the earliest memory I found that shaped me in that sense, because I think everybody has these experiences that shape them either, in the context of business, going towards being a business owner yourself, or some domain that you want to become expert in. For me, computer science and that part was what I was interested in, was what I studied later on. Or also some things like leadership qualities. I mean, if you start a company, you need to be able to communicate to a team, motivate them, get them on the path to success, and really their ups and downs, and how do you handle that. And I think also looking back, I was a very shy kid. And
you're still very shy.
I'm still very shy.
like me.
But you find coping mechanisms, or you learn, you practice, and then it becomes a habit. But when I was young, I recall that my grandmother, she had to force me to join the Boy Scouts. I was so afraid of all the kids I didn't know, and she really had to force me to go there for the first evening. But I totally fell in love with it, because the concept, young kids, and once a week we'd meet and play goofy games, and we would learn things like we would learn signaling, Morse code, and first aid, and you learn a lot of cool things you get in contact with. And they throw in this group of young kids, and of course, I didn't go in there saying, okay, I want to, build some leadership skills. But what naturally happened was, what they do is they break down the group into wolf packs, groups of, I think, 5 or 6 kids. And I don't know why, but they named me to be the group leader. And then I was in that role as a young kid. And we did all kinds of, also competitive games. And you had to get your team to win and to work together. And that was, looking back, also something where, being a shy kid, or just a regular kid that doesn't know much about anything like social dynamics and groups, but where you can try it out and build some competence. And I think that's probably not something that you can force in this age. But if you look at very young kids, it's definitely something that can help them on their entrepreneurial journey. In particular,
was your father and your mother, were they entrepreneurs, or like where did that mindset come from?
That's a very good question, because it's a good point. None of my parents were entrepreneurs, but what I learned from them were a couple of things that I think still made the way into my mindset that helped me today as an entrepreneur. They both are from different parts of Austria, and they came to Vienna because they loved the city. They wanted to be here, and that's where they met. And they had me, and I have an older sister. And so I just saw my parents being these people that really knew they wanted to be here, and they both had jobs that they really loved. My mother was a teacher, and she commuted 1 hour each way to a school outside of Vienna, because she just loved the students and more like the countryside dynamic of schools there compared to Vienna. And she would commute 1 hour each way every day for, 30, 40 years. And she loved it so much. And my father was working in a field, a big brand. They had retail outlets all across Austria. And he would love it so much. He knew every owner of those shops across Austria. When we would go skiing into the mountains, and we asked for directions, because that was before there was GPS navigation. And someone would say, yeah, well, at that shop you turn a left. And he said, oh, okay, I got it. And he would continue driving and say, because that shop, Mr. XYZ works there, and he's doing good revenue. He knew all these things because he was so deep and so in love with that business.
So basically you grew up with a spirit where, like, at least do what you love.
Absolutely. So for them, it was not entrepreneurship. And it was interesting, because the challenge that I had, and that was already into my student age. So when I was a student, so 18, 19 years and onward, at that point, I really knew I wanted to become an entrepreneur. And I had a tough time, because my mother would be more the cautious one. So whenever I shared some thoughts or some ideas of a business with them, my mother would always say, oh, it's so dangerous, and think about it twice, but if you want to do it, I support you. And my father would always say, oh, yeah, sounds great, and I will support you. But neither of those two really helped me, reflecting on, is this a good idea or not, or how should I do that?
Can you remember why or when you, like, because I figured it out in our conversation beforehand that you actually already had very early on, compared to all the other speakers, or most of the speakers that we had beforehand, that you actually very early on knew that you want to become an entrepreneur. which is totally different because other people stumble into it and then have a good idea and I think, oh, like let's find some people. And but you were like, oh yeah, can you remember what time that has been and like how that changed you a bit into like how did this develop that you then at 18, 19 said, I want to be an entrepreneur?
Yeah. Good question, because when you're young, when you're a kid, you don't think about career and still want to be an entrepreneur. But somewhere end of high school, beginning of college, I think that's where it became clear. But what happened naturally also for me was that already in primary school, but then also in high school, I had some businesses, like a little thing to make some additional pocket money, because you know my dad not handing out cash for free, as you heard, so I had to create some additional revenue streams. And for instance, in high school, one of the ideas that worked quite well was I was building a marketplace for console games. Now, but think that we're talking about 90s, so marketplace didn't mean online, but I was the marketplace, and consoles meant Game Boy. So I would walk around and...
Who had a Game Boy in here? An old Game Boy, a white one, like, you know.
Excellent. Fantastic.
I still have one. I got one for my birthday from my fiancé. It's the best thing ever.
I was really good at Tetris.
Yeah.
Did you ever launch the big rocket?
Yeah.
All right.
Cool
stuff.
But I played on NES. But let's keep on.
So I just went around and said, okay, which games do you not want to play anymore, and do you want to sell, and for what price? And I walked around and said, what game do you want? And I just did arbitrage business. So there was one guy saying, I would pay 300 for the golf game. Then
Shillings. Let's be clear.
And then another guy would want to sell it for 200. So I said, okay, give me the 300. I went to the other guy, here's 200. Thank you very much. Went up again, gave him the game. 100 in my pocket.
It's the best business ever.
Zero risk business. So I did these kind of things, but I didn't think this is like it has to be this huge business. I just naturally saw an opportunity and capitalized on it.
So then you had this idea of becoming an entrepreneur. So of course you said that you studied, and like what is your experiences at university, and like how did then you develop your steps, and yet to your professional experience, which was not entrepreneurial, the first one, and give us an insight over this phase of your life, this part of your life, from university to first experiences.
So, I mean, first of all, for me, university was the best time ever, because I came out of the regular school system where you have your timetable, so somebody decides what you do at what time. And I loved my high school times. I had a really great time, but college really was for me pure freedom. You know, you go out there, you sign up, and I knew I wanted to do Wirtschaftsinformatik, so a combination of business and IT, because those were the two fields I was very interested in. I wrote a thesis, Fachbereichsarbeit, in high school about programming languages, and I did elective course in math and IT, so I was totally in that area. But the business aspect was also important to me, so I didn't want to do only informatics. So Wirtschaftsinformatik, I heard that this exists. Okay, it was clear this is what I want. I wanted to study this. And you go out there, and back then it was, I mean, the Wild West. I don't know how it is today, but you had all kinds of lectures, and then they had this huge wall in university at the TU where they had little cards. Each lecture was a card on the wall, and you could buy a book, and you could go, okay, which lectures do I have? And you had to pick and choose and create your own itinerary. And I just picked everything I could get. I actually created a little Excel macro where you put in all the courses, and some of the courses you could do at different times. And it optimized, so I got the most courses in one semester. It optimized this. And I just love the fact that I can decide what I do and how I do it and when I do it and how fast I do it. Others struggled with that situation. They're like, give me a timetable for this semester or the next one. For me, it was fantastic. And I think this is maybe an indicator if you can thrive and excel in a field where you need to create your own tracks, where you need to, nobody's telling you what to do. And as an entrepreneur and business owner, there will be nobody really telling you now do this, then do that. I mean, you might have advisors or co-owners or investors, but you need to do this.
In the end, it's always, you get a lot of advice, but it's your decision, isn't it?
Exactly. And if you struggle, if this is totally shocking you or like challenging for you on a day-to-day basis to look at the options that you have, know what you want, and then go and pursue it, entrepreneurship might not be your thing, or you might suffer in the process. You might still create a successful company, but personally, it's a stress you have every day.
So you knew that you want to be an entrepreneur, but your first step after university was not entrepreneurial in that sense, like starting a company. You started to get some professional experience. Like, when did you decide? Why did you decide not like today, say, drop out of university and go for being the next Facebook, which didn't exist at that time, I guess. I don't know your exact age. I don't want to say anything wrong, but
of course, I too invented Facebook, right? Like so many. No, I had that idea, and I totally no. But yeah, but even backstepping still into college time. That was when I explained before the situation that my parents, they were totally supportive, but they couldn't give me the really in-depth, valuable feedback or insights, or it didn't help me. They were just supportive, which is good, but how do I find people that think like me? And you have to imagine back in the, when was it, late 90s? That sounds so horrible. But back then, there were no events like this where you could go, like all you guys, you're proactive, you got your butt out of the chair, you said, I'm going there. I mean, hopefully in part because you hope that you learn or hear something that triggers a thought, but also to meet all the other people, your network, of course. That didn't exist. And I thought, where do I find those people? I want to be around those people and work with them and learn from them and discuss those things. And that's when at college we had a course, and there was this professor, Bob Hisrich from the US.
Oh, Bob, yeah, I know
Yeah,
him.
yeah. And he was here, and this was a complete elective course. You didn't get any credits for it, but it was a room of 20, 30 people who came there just because they loved the topic that he would talk about. And that's where I stood up and said, okay, guys, seriously, all you guys, you're the ones that I have been looking for all over the place. I will pass around a sheet of paper. Please write your email address on it if you too want to stay in touch and talk about, because I want to create some kind of club or some kind of society or a group that helps each other in that field. And that's how the first entrepreneurial founders or startup club was founded. It was called IDEX, short for Idea Exchange. And we got people from business school and TU, and so I really had to build that up because it didn't exist. And at that point, it was very, very clear already for me that I want to become an entrepreneur, and I wanted to be around those people. And I also worked when I was a student, and I could really practice some business skills because I found myself some cool job opportunities, and I could go into more detail there. But again, I saw something that I was really interested in, and I really went out there and got myself an internship there. And I started because it was so interesting. I completed my master's studies. Back then, you had the 2 segments, each 2 years. That's the minimum time, and the average was not 4 years, but 5 years or something.
That was before bachelor's and master's.
Exactly. You only had the master's, and that was a 2 times 2 years, 2 segments. It was so interesting for me that I just wanted to learn all these things that I completed the whole thing in 3 years. And then in the 7th semester, I just did my master's thesis out in Denmark. And at most of the time, I worked 20 hours a week for Kapsch, where I found a really fantastic mentor who was my boss there, a guy who was just like 5, 6, 7 years older than me. And I even worked at at the bank on the side doing data analysis and so on. But it was just, taking all these opportunities of learning and seeing things and absorbing it. So it was really clear that.
What was the major learnings you had during that? Let's call them professional years as an employee, partly doing other stuff. But what were the major learnings you did, and what would you suggest everybody has this experience before he starts as an entrepreneur? Is there topics that you want to focus on, telling guys you really need to do that, learn to do that?
I mean, if it's just supposed to be a couple of things, you cannot overvalue the opportunity you have at college to build a network to people, people that think or that you share some interest with, because some people I met back there that are still in the entrepreneurship arena, some people that were in the first couple of years of building up IDEX, they're still doing startup stuff at VU Wien and in other universities and in the ecosystem. And also, and that's also why, and maybe we can then, depending on how we're doing it with time, fast forward to why I actively decided not to start my first company right out of college, but I took a decision to go find myself a company where I knew exactly what this company needed to offer or what kind of company it was supposed to be.
That is actually what I was interested in. So, like, what was the decision and what did you want to find? So because that's maybe an interesting topic. And if you did you find it or did you find other stuff, learn other stuff? And because we should then get going into the startup direction, because that's what we're here for.
Totally. And we're actually on topic with that, because connecting your last two questions, you should really try to find opportunities for you to learn things and get insights into industries, or find a boss, your first boss, that you can just learn so much from day-to-day business, how he runs teams, how he runs meetings, how he interacts in sales situations, whatever your field is. If you're more in the tech field, how he organizes development projects, or join him when he goes to a conference and mingles with other experts, and just observe. I mean, starting out, everybody, you know nothing how things work and what are the best things to achieve something. And just by observing those people, it's so educational. And I would definitely recommend that you try to go into that industry that you're interested in to get some inside views. And that connects us to my decision when I was done with my college, and I added a PhD in a research center. It was exciting to develop algorithms for. Well, it's a whole different thing. But after I was done with that, and the academic field didn't really satisfy me, I really wanted to put the stuff that I invented into action, and that was not possible there. I said, okay, there's one core competence that I will need as a founder, and that's sales. And I don't only mean sales in terms of finding customers and selling them your product, because sales to me is a mindset plus some methods that work in different directions. You sell your product, of course, but you sell your idea to investors. You sell your idea to coworkers or people that want to join your dodgy little startup that's uncertain whether that will ever be profitable, right? How do you sell that to them, that there is an opportunity? You have to sell that you are an entrepreneur, maybe to your girlfriend, boyfriend, spouse, because they might not be entrepreneurs and have a hard time understanding why you want to go down that road. So I really wanted to learn that. And so I set out and I wanted to go to Munich. I wanted to go to Germany, in particular to Munich, because I just loved the city. I fell in love with the city on a couple of trips. And I wanted to go into a big country.
Was it in October?
No, actually, my first Oktoberfest that you're hinting at was after I moved there. But it's a fantastic city, and it's within a huge country. And the business context there is just different than business in Austria. But so my search pattern was Munich, IT company or something that has to do with IT, because that's what I learned and what I'm passionate about. A sales job, of course, really hardcore sales. And a small company where if I believe I have this brilliant idea, like young people do, we always have the brilliantest of ideas, right? That I can knock at the door of the CEO and have a conversation, then it's yes or no, which in a corporate setting is very difficult. But to really have a small organization where you can see how things work and who those people are. And again, if you know what you want, I knew exactly what I wanted. So I went out there, I went to behind the CeBIT, there is another, or used to be another big IT trade show called Systems in Munich.
And it doesn't exist anymore.
Right?
No, it doesn't exist anymore.
But it was big, and I just screened all the companies. I found 7 companies that I thought they have a kick-ass cool product that has potential and that I would like. I educated myself what it was and why I liked it. I mean, it's a natural process. Why did I like that company? And I just went up to those booths. Normally, you have the sales manager standing there, and I said, "Hey, Mr. Sales Manager, I like your company for reason A, B, and C. This is me. I want to work for your company. What's the deal? more or less like this. But and I guess they don't get those kind of.
I think that's not what they suppose on a trade fair when they actually want to sell their stuff. They don't. They want to
Exactly. So out of those 7 companies, 2 of them offered me a job, and one of them, the one that I liked more, I picked that one. And I still think today, if you really know what you want and you know why you want to work for a company, and if you tell them that, I mean, that's a no-brainer. Any boss would love that. And I can tell you from recruiting people, it's very rare that people come in the door and say, I'm here, because I know I want to work here, and here are my 3 reasons why. I rarely have those job interviews with candidates.
But it's very nice, because when I had job interviews with candidates, it was always good when they said, okay, guys, I got that. That's your company. That's what you're doing. I love that. That's my view on that thing. Could work together. That was really nice, because then somebody identifies with you. Maybe let's switch over from this. Then you got a lot of sales experience, and then you started your first company. And like, how did that transition? Of course, with you, it was of course more like a process, because it didn't probably happen overnight. But like, tell us a bit more about this stage, and then we're gonna come up
how it happened. Yeah. So I went out to Munich, said I'm gonna do this for 2 years, because then I should have learned that stuff. But it got really interesting, and I for many different reasons it was interesting. It got more interesting. I got more insights and more responsibility and cool projects, also international projects. So in the end, I stayed for 4.5 years. But at some point, this company was acquired by a corporate, and they would just stack on layer on new organizational layers. And even though that brought this international flavor, and the bosses in Helsinki, so we were acquired by the IT division of Finland Post, even they saw something in me and really supported me and gave me, for my age, amazing projects, and involved me in top level strategic projects, which at the same time created some political situations, older sales guys not understanding this whole thing. And at some point I realized, okay, this is now this corporate political thing where it's not anymore just making cool stuff and getting the sale and creating new products, but I spend like 20% of my time doing politics. So that people would embrace the changes that we would develop in those projects. It was a nightmare. So I knew at that point it's enough, and my plan was always to go back and start my own company. So at that point, I just opened the drawer with all my old business ideas and business plans, and polished them up, and also re-engaged with people back in Austria, where I of course still had my densest network of entrepreneurs. And there was this opportunity that just appeared, where people were working on an idea, and we were tossing ideas back and forth, and it just somehow ended up becoming a company where we instantly had a setup of 5 founders or co-founders / investors. One who brought in was a little fund that brought in 200K of seed funding to get us going. And a pretty interesting business model or business idea, and I just started working on that. So for me, at that point, it was a no-brainer. I was still in Munich, and this opportunity came up pretty fast, so it was a total no-brainer to just close shop in Munich, move back to Vienna, and just completely focus on that.
So what was that company basically about, the business model, and like what were your biggest hurdles, and then basically how did you develop into spinning off Ulmon, which then became an own thing and basically your main occupation now?
Yeah, and even one more step in between. I mean, the cool thing is whatever you do, there's always so much learning, and I hope that never stops. I guess it never stops. No matter how smart or experienced you think you are, you always see new stuff, and that's the cool thing about business life, I guess. But this startup, it had a really cool model. So there was this big problem with companies that have distributed sales organizations. So where the guys selling the product would be maybe not even a direct subsidiary or shop. You would see that in franchise systems where you have shops that are run by independent entrepreneurs, or in the automotive industry where the car dealers, they're independent companies. But you have this big brand on top, and they put millions and millions into this top brand. Let's stick with cars, right? But the cars are sold somewhere else, not in the headquarter of Honda in Vienna somewhere, I don't know, but in the shops. And they want those shops to use the brands, leverage the campaigns, advertising campaigns that they run, and do it locally to get people in the door and sell cars. But they want them to respect the corporate identity, but they want them to be independent and know the local advertising market with local newspapers and so on. So we had this software that would support this process, and it was a software as a service cloud thing before there was those words. Nobody.
Well, it was ASP at that time, wasn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's always the same. Changes names all 3 years.
And it was a tool that would help those companies put in their marketing campaigns in the top, and the tool would allow the shops from the bottom to take campaigns, manipulate them within some restrictions, localize them, but not break the CI or do crazy stuff. And from the software, book it into a newspaper or into, there were different modules you could book right into newspapers, and we had interfaces with all the newspapers, radio spots, even billboards and everything. So we wanted to solve that problem that they had. And there was a lot of money flowing in that process as well, because the corporates, they support marketing activities locally. If you spend the money according to a campaign, they would give you 50% back, but you need to do it according to CI. So there was a process that had a lot of money attached, which is always good. You want to be close to the money with a solution. That's always a good thing. And this was the basis, and we wanted to establish that. And once we have control, more or less, or have on our system all these bookings of advertising, we wanted to leverage that by also putting our hand in the honeypot of these euros or shillings or whatever it was back then spent on marketing, and just be like a platform like Google, just profiting from all the marketing spend that goes on. So that was the theory, right? And like, who said it? Some boxer, you always have a plan until you get the first punch in the face or something, right? Everyone has a plan until you get knocked in the face. So that was the theory, right? And then stuff happened.
Yeah, that's what I want to get into, like what stuff happened. Because it's basically what we nowadays call a platform, but only it's like intermediate, you're playing intermediate between the twos. I don't know if the business model was that... did the big company pay and the small companies only use, but then you have to like also sell them. They don't have to pay for it maybe, but sell them to use this tool. So like how was that process, and what did you learn, and what were the biggest bumps that you had in this road? And what were the biggest bumps in that road? And then we're gonna switch over to Ulmon, because we're running tight on time already, but there's enough time.
All right. So I mean, looking back at how we all approach this today, where there are even names for processes around lean startup, how you validate ideas. Looking back, I mean, we just got going, but we got funding, right? So you don't think twice, you just start. But somehow it was crazy. We could have validated some things much earlier. But then it wasn't going so bad at the first stage. We never reached the second stage that I mentioned, but the first stage was going actually pretty okay-ish. But then we also had the situation with the financial crisis. And then out of, 2 out of 3 of the big deals we had just fell flat on their face. They were in the making, and then they weren't signed, or some were canceled. And we were just, the projections were like this. And then the actual numbers, at some point, the gap was growing and growing. And there was one major learning for me, because I still recall, like it was yesterday, my first board meeting with the co-founders and investors, where there was a real substantial gap in plan numbers and actual numbers. And we had a fantastic relationship, all the founders and investors, and we were on first name basis, and those were those experienced guys around me, right? And the investors, and you're on first name basis with them, and they had huge successes in their own fields. And so you think, yeah, I'm one of them, and it's a very collaborative situation. So I walked into that board meeting, really preparing, lining out the situation. What is the gap? How big is it? Why is it like this? And preparing to set this up for a discussion. Okay, what can we do? How can we fix this problem? Right? I mean, at least back then it made a lot of sense to me. And so I don't blame you if you still think, yeah, sounds good. But then what happened was I walked in there, and the investor, they were represented by 2 guys. And one of them, there was no shouting involved or no personal attacks or anything. But one guy, I don't know the literal words, But what he basically said is, Florian, I hear the problem, I see the problem, and you come in here as the CEO asking us for the solution for your business. I think you're misunderstanding something here. You're the CEO. I expect you to come in here with an analysis of the problem and some options how to solve it, and we're happy to contribute. But what do you think you're doing? Just throwing it on the table, showing gaps in the charts, and then saying, "Oh, let's talk about it." And there's this saying to be this tall with a hat in Austrian. So I walked in like saying, no problem, we're all friends. And I walked out the door that size. And then the other guy of the investor, he was like the good cop, and he coached and mentored me and explained what happened. And he told me a lesson that I used in every startup after that, and that I tell young founders that go into their first board meetings. What he told me was, Florian, you never go into a board meeting where the board members hear about a big problem there for the first time. You don't do that, because it puts everybody on the spot. You can't solve those problems right there. You don't do that. I mean, crazy stuff, everything goes in that situation. You open yourself out to just crazy stuff happening. Because what do you expect them to, suddenly having the solution that you couldn't figure out? So what you do is you have one-on-one conversations, before the board meeting, ease everybody into the problem, ask them if they understand what the situation is, how you're going to present a solution, if they have some additional questions, because you want to come prepared to that meeting, to have everything on the table, of course, also including solution. And then there's no surprise. People can reflect on that, maybe do their homework, and then you have a productive meeting again. Even though the situation is dire, but startups 9 out of 10, no matter on what level you are, will fail. We all know the game, and that was painful at that moment. But I had also this mentor who got me through that, and it helped me tremendously in the years to come.
It helped you probably tremendously in Ulmon, where you also raised quite substantial money. So tell us about basically what is Ulmon. Who knows Ulmon in here? Oh, it's not that big, so maybe tell them what Ulmon does, and then tell us the story how you kicked off Ulmon, how it became one of the major basically a major occupying project at the moment, the main thing currently.
Yeah, so Ulmon is a mobile app. It's a platform that allows you to collect inspirations and ideas for trips that you do. Because what every traveler knows, people that travel a lot, more independent travelers, not all-inclusive travelers, but every one of you who does these independent city trips and traveling around, road trip kind of things, you always have in the back of your mind a set of destinations that I think I want to go there soon at some point. And for all of those destinations, you're open for ideas. Whenever you read or see something, you're like, I need to memorize that. I want to go there. The next time I'm in Paris, or you see it on TV, there's this fantastic restaurant that does I don't know what. Okay. And there is no standard way to collect those ideas that you get from different channels, people talking to you, newspapers, TV, but also online channels. And we want to build something like this that helps people get inspired. So part is to proactively receive recommendations for things that you're interested in, but also just give you a platform where you can collect all those things for your future trips. And by doing so, you build your own travel guide, if you will. So this is a way into the market that we think is very feasible, and it's a big trend. Independent travel and Airbnb and all these kind of things. It's a big trend. And
so how did you basically come up with this idea? What was the path you followed, and what was the big things that you learned there? Because we already know that you now know how to manage a board, but so what was that story?
So we started, we founded the company in late 2010. So you can see we're quite out there for some time. And I think there are some statistics, or the most recent one I read is that 2 out of 3 of successful startups end up being successful with an idea that is very different from what they started out with. 2 out of 3. And Ulmon is no exception there, because back then the core USP was an offline map, because you had people, you had iPhones suddenly, and then you had some apps, but most of them relied on data connectivity. And we just built something that worked offline. You had your content, your points of interest, but offline maps, it's a thing of the past. If you say that this is your USP, so we had to evolve and build on that. So the first step was offline maps, and we had great product market fit there, and got a lot of traction there. And we evolved it into a more of a travel guides and more content, and also a social layer that was not really unique enough to really take off. And so this developed step by step. And I think it's a constant process. And for instance, if you look at other successful companies, maybe here in the Vienna ecosystem even, if you know Spock, right? Big success story. But they started out with something completely different.
Yeah, it was called Finally. I can
Exactly.
remember that.
And they almost went belly up, right? It was really tough situation at some point saying, okay, are we brave enough to say, screw this, and we need to find something new and pivot and find something that's feasible enough? Or do we stick with this idea? Or another one was just a recent presentation at the Stammtisch, Grape,
Yeah.
right? Chat Grape, now Grape, and how they evolved, and the stories that he shared. It's fantastic. And I think it's nothing to be too worried about, but you need to build an organization or a process that facilitates this dynamic of finding product market fit before you can really double down and scale up. And that's one of the biggest learnings, I guess, in the journey of Ulmon, that if your organization grows and you are still searching for that product market fit, that really supports a tremendous growth. Once you find, the match of problem solution, this fit. How do you build this that it's clear how everybody in the organization can contribute to finding that and then accelerating it?
But there's a major point there, because probably everybody in this room, or most of the people in this room, will know term product market fit, but I think a lot don't understand what it actually means, because I can remember I was like, yeah, who cares? I definitely know what it means. And 2 years into my last startup, it was like, oh, fuck, I really didn't get it from the beginning, Yeah. And it's something that you need to develop and you need to share, and that's something that maybe you got some advantage when you were with Hannes in Silicon Valley, and there you also you're really contributing a lot. So give us some insight, you do a lot of stuff on the side, and give us some insight how that developed, because you did Startup Report AT, it's on there, and you're now doing milestonehunters.com, some kind of project supporting the community. And this all is sharing know-how that you've acquired with people in this room. So give us some insight, when did you start stuff like that, and what can people expect, and what would you also like people to do? Because there's always saying, okay, this guy does great stuff, but you can do great stuff. Everybody can do great stuff, and it's like you said in the beginning, me sitting here with Hannes on the side and a couple more people who are either ill or traveling currently. It's like we simply said, I like this format, let's bring it to Vienna. That's something, sharing something. So give us some insight into that.
How are we doing on time?
Basically, we're right on the end
good.
of the interview, but we're going to keep on a bit more, and then
So
we're going
to
to have
tie
a
this all
Q&A.
in, product market fit, because you mentioned it, it's such an important concept. And I think the easiest definition that I found for myself is if you have a retention curve that at some point goes flat out. Retention curve is, if you look at a cohort, all the users that you got in January, how many of those are still active in February, March, April, May? It's a curve that goes down. If it keeps going down, you don't have product market fit. But if a segment of the users that you acquire stick around no matter what, then you got it. I think that's the easiest definition. If you see that chart doing this, you're in good territory. If it still does this, you need to keep digging and really understanding what's the problem. Why can't you keep? Why is it not creating that value for people to stick around? And so that ties in nicely with what you mentioned.
Your little pet project.
Pet projects. Maybe not so much with Startup Report. Let's get this one out of the way, because Startup Report, the idea really was, I had this concept in my mind that said there are so many cool things happening in our ecosystem in Austria, in Vienna. Great startups, great founders. And I'm in the ecosystem for quite some time, but still there are things popping up, people or companies that I've never heard of. But even to me today, this gives me a boost of energy if I see other people do cool stuff and succeed doing it. And even if it's just for trying to get in touch with the person, learn from him, but just seeing that it's possible. And especially for young people, for me back then, I really looked where are people that I can look for as role models. So I wanted to get those people out from behind the curtain and into the spotlight. And Startup Report is not more, not less than a list of all the startups that had fundings, substantial fundings in the year 2015. And more importantly, who are the founders and what are their stories and how do they go about doing business. So the biggest part is the Q&A.
Yeah,
of
it's great
them
for me. Like
sharing
I've
that.
got now finally a list for the rest of the year who people if I want to invite.
Yeah.
It's like really, it's made my life so much easier.
Exactly.
Thank you very much.
And some of those people, they're not very present, right? You don't find them at networking events because they don't do that for different reasons, not good, not bad, or they're just so focused on their business, but they're fantastic individuals out there. So I wanted to put that out there, especially for young people to get this energy boost of saying, it's possible here. That was my only reason. And I tried for years to give that to a journalist of a big print publication. I pitched the idea, say, come on, why don't you do this? And the resources needed. So this Christmas, I thought, I'm just going to do it myself. So in a couple of weeks, I just did it in January, done.
So one thing done, second thing to go, Milestone Hunters. And
yeah, Milestone Hunters really ties in with what we just talked about, because I dedicated, last year I made a pledge to myself that I want to dedicate 5% of my time to pay it forward, to give it to young founders that I don't expect anything in return from them directly, but just helping them. Because when I was in Silicon Valley, I profited so much from that, and also hear people helping me. And I think it's part of an ecosystem, and I want to encourage everyone. And no matter if you think where you are on this learning pyramid, like there's the most brilliant people up there and your first startup down here and wherever you think you are, no matter where you are, there's always more people who know less than you do, who are still struggling to get to where you are, and just share what you know and what you've learned. So I can only encourage everyone to do that.
It's a very great thing, and I experienced it myself. So to like really focus on maybe something for you to take away when you're then successful entrepreneur and have 200 people, whatever, employees, to share something bad. I had a very long 1 hour talk with Morten Primdal, who's the CTO of Zendesk, and basically helped this company, like software as a service, great thing. Denmark team IPO'd, like really did very well sitting in Silicon Valley. It took 1 hour of his time for me to present Sphere as my current startup at that time to him, and then simply talk and like reflect, and he like really paid it forward. And a lot of people do that. You doing that, a lot of people should do it. So maybe something for you to take away. When you're successful, think about all the others that might profit from you. And even if you're not successful, there's enough that you've learned that others can profit from.
Everyone's successful because everything you try, even if it fails, you've learned something. And there are enough people out there who still would need to waste that time to learn the same thing you have learned. So don't underestimate what you already know and have learned. So out of this 5% pledge I gave to myself, I started helping young startup founders at Startup Weekend, Startup Life, and these kind of events and mentoring. And I realized that some of the problems that kept reoccurring, so there were always very similar questions or challenges, and I observed that young founders, with all their energy and motivation, they started running off in all kinds of directions and struggled figuring out, with all the topics that are flying around, which one do I need to focus on? Growth hacking and fundraising and social media and content marketing, millions of things, finding co-founders, building a company culture, do millions of things. But what I think, or the model that I found for myself, is that if you want to get from idea to funding or fundability, it's still your decision if you want to take funding, but to be fundable, which is the biggest, very big milestone. There are 4 steps. It's actually 4 milestones. That's why Milestone Hunters. And for me, there is I learned that there are those 4 segments, and in each of those, you need to focus on a few things, but focus on those and ignore everything else, because it's only important later on. Don't think about growth hacking when you still just have an idea. Don't think about fundraising if you haven't even built your product yet, right? And what I want to do on Milestone Hunters is really make those stories that I keep telling those young founders, make them accessible to everybody, so it's scalable, right? It's a startup term very well everyone is familiar with, because I can't have coffee meetings with 1,000 guys a year, but thousands and thousands of people could read this information. I really want to prepare it in a way that helps people to say, okay, I have an idea now. What can I do right now before even if I can't code and I have an idea for a software startup, there are still things you can and should do right now before worrying about, I can't do anything, I need a co-founder who can code, or I need to learn how to code, or I need funding or some government grant first. No. There are things you need and should do to validate your idea. Once you still believe that's great, then you start building your MVP, and there are processes and methods how you do that to really validate in practice if your idea, your solution hits the spot with the problem. And once you have that product market fit, then it's time for growth, and you should do that. And then if you have all those ducks aligned, it's easy peasy to raise funding. But you have all the cards in your hand at that point, and then it's time for fundraising.
It's a very good point that I see with a lot of startups, that like they're doing everything at once instead of focusing. So there's like big thing about focusing to get focused, and it's even like, I think that I'm organized and well focused, but trust me, there's a thing between focus and focus. It's something we really need to be aware of. So how will milestones develop now? I think you're doing some workshops now, and then there's going to be some kind of rule guideline or whatever. What can those people? Where can they approach you and learn something from you?
I mean, a couple of things. First of all, if you go on milestonehunters.com, what I've put up there is a little ebook or a PDF that you can download that outlines this 4-step process, and it gives some flavor of what I'll be going into more detail with. I'm working on launching the blog where that really goes in more depth. What are the 4 or 5 things that you should focus on in each of those phases? And I want to make this really actionable, that it's not like an opinion piece, writing, okay, I think this is important, but at the end of each post, you have templates, checklists, guides, where you can really go, okay, let me download this and do it right now, right? I think that's something that helps people. And the idea is to help people. So because you mentioned workshops, being a lean practitioner, what I've done is just put up a workshop next week where I share the concept that I'll be writing about, just to validate which of the things are more and maybe less important or relevant to the audience, to the potential audience. Because I don't want to produce something nobody cares about. This is just for the community, that they get value out of it. So I might as well invest the time right and focus on those things that people actually get value out of.
So back to focus, and let's focus on some questions. So we've got some Q&A session now.
Sure.
And Florian is going to be here afterwards for private talks as well, as far as I know. And so, as always, with the question and answer session at our event, please simply show us a sign. I'll point to you. You'll ask your question. I'll repeat the question, so we've got it on camera and on the live stream, and then Florian can answer the questions. So, questions. Jesus, today nobody has questions.
Just give them time.
It's always very clear. Oh, Hannes. So the question was about your experiences in Silicon Valley and what you could take home, and also maybe something about the misconceptions that we in Austria have. I recently stated that there's utopia, and it's probably not utopia, but let's give us some insight on those parts, on this part of your travel.
Yeah, very good question. Well, I have to say I was, of course, also guilty of having some misperceptions going there. The idea was, okay, the situation was we had this app out there, and we had, downloads increasing, and we had revenue, so people actually paid for the pro app or for the paid for app. And the hypothesis that I jumped on the plane on was, well, I'll talk to investors and I'll just get us some nice VC money for our startup here in Austria. And what I learned is that it's almost impossible to get early stage investment from an American investor into an Austrian company, just because they, especially early on, they want to be close to their startups to really help them. They want they don't understand the European legal system. They have lawyers and all the contracts set up to work in the US, so that's difficult for them. And they have so many investment opportunities in the valley, in Silicon Valley or anywhere else in the hubs in the US. So if there is, if they want to do something in travel and they have 10 opportunities, it makes much more sense for them to invest locally. So, but I pitch to investors there a lot, and many of those great top line like Excel partners and so on, they have their offices also in London. So when we really started fundraising a couple of years later, of course, I used that connection and stayed in touch with them to get meetings in London with their offices. So that was something you can definitely do, use that detour. But I think the most important thing is, for me personally also, just going out there thinking I'm the king of the world, right? I mean, my startup in Austria, in mobile apps and in travel, we're totally kicking it. And then you meet people there, startup founders, who are so brilliant, and many of them, and observe them and see how they do stuff and what methods they use and what tools they use and how they go about, networking at conferences and everything. Just, it gives you this new benchmark that is suddenly up here. And for me, that's not demotivating, but motivating to see, wow, there's so much, again, that I can learn. There's this potential to get better. That was a huge impulse for me to really understand where the real benchmark is.
The real benchmark is. Before we do the real benchmark, I have to ask a favor. Vincent, could you please pay the pizzas? Because they're here already, it seems. And we don't want them to be either taken away or getting too cold. They're a bit early. I expect them to be here in 10 minutes.
And maybe one thing that I really have to recommend if you are a team or a couple of founders, it's a challenge if you send one of the guys to the valley, because you learn so much. And my business DNA has really morphed and changed from this radioactivity or whatever, if you want to paint this picture. But it really has evolved so much. I came back a different business person with so much knowledge around startups, and conveying that to your partners, because you saw it 3, 4, 5 times how people do things, what tools to use. Now you are in a situation where you need to convince them that it makes sense, but for you it's just clear that this is the way you need to do it. And some of those points you cannot get across. So you should always share the time there, evenly if possible, but keep people in the loop, because otherwise there's this gap building that you then need to narrow again. And that's really tough.
That may be one of the reasons why VCs wouldn't fund something that's too far away, because there's gaps developing in perception. One of the reasons they might not do that. Any other questions? There is one in front first, and then...
What are your advices about fundraising and investments, especially in American investors who have so many opportunities? What is your tip to get fundraising from them who have hundreds of ideas from America and everywhere else? Or what would you recommend for other startups to do?
The question is what is your approach to fundraising, especially on, I think it's not even American, it's every VC who has like,
India, Russia.
who has like at least hundreds or thousands of ideas he can choose from. Like, how would you approach them? And like, what's your tips on fundraising? I can summarize.
So I have an opinion on Europe and US. I've never fundraised in India or in Asia or South America, so I don't know what their expectation is. But what I can tell you is forget fundraising in the US, at least at the beginning. It's just a time and money waste, and it's just not maybe you do that in your second, third round, that you're performing so well and it's more advanced that you get those funds in. But still, you need to think, why do you need dollars instead of euros? But definitely fundraise in Europe. I mean, US, a startup in Austin flies 4,000 miles to San Francisco, or is it 3,000, to pitch, and they get money. So it would be crazy for us in Europe, where Europe is our home market. Why wouldn't we jump on a plane for 1,000 kilometers to Berlin, or 1,500 kilometers to London? It doesn't make, so we really focused on, of course, Austria, but it's a very limited pool that you can use. But then in Germany and the UK, I mean, we all speak English and German. It was a no-brainer, and you should definitely do that. And the general tip with fundraising, don't do it too early, because it doesn't work if you can't prove some of the things that investors want to see. And be clear for yourself, what is your personal goal? Do you need VC funding? Because I mean, you can be an entrepreneur building a nice business that creates profits for you, and bootstrap it all the way to being a big success. Nothing wrong with that. Just talk to people who have investors and the pros and cons and the dynamic that you bring on board, and if you need it or want it.
So I think that answers a bit of the question. I had a question back there, please.
How did you evaluate the effectiveness of milestone hunters? Was it more like a quality feedback loop exchange with the young startups, or was it really upon, I don't know, numbers? Or
Yeah.
because when I'm a young startup, I don't know if your technique is more like effective than like my like kind of point of view. So they maybe didn't know that this is more effective.
So the question was about milestone hunters. How did you evaluate the effectiveness, or maybe how you are evaluating it at the moment and after the workshop, like so that a startup can say, okay, this is good for me, or this might not be good for me.
Well, ultimately, it still remains to be seen if it creates value for people, and I won't continue doing it if people don't see value in it. But how I validated step by step before I started investing more of my time doing it, it's like with any regular startup. I had my personal opinions and experiences, but then before Christmas, or in December sometime, I sent emails out to young founders, experienced founders, and investors, and I have plenty of contacts, and I asked them similar questions. What are the challenges? What are the things that people need? What are they struggling with? And it was interesting the kind of feedback I got there, and building on that, I outlined this concept, and I see, of course, numbers in downloads of this ebook, but I mean, it's not hundreds of thousands of downloads, of course, because it was just released recently. But I just want to see what people say and if they see value in it. And I will do build, measure, learn in the sense that I want to be close to the people that use it and get their feedback. For instance, doing a workshop next week with 10 people, just going in depth in the first phase. I just go through the topics and just gauge what do they find valuable, or what triggers more questions than I can actually answer at that point.
It's basically
just take it from there.
like basically using the lean approach also on that part, which startups should use at least, especially when they can use it, depending on your product. Is there another question? You already had, but you can talk later. There's one question in the back.
I want to go back to the topic of sales. I liked how you said that you figured out you needed to acquire this skill and went to a company to learn it there. If you were in a situation right now where you're already in your own company and you know, okay, I still got to improve on this, I got to learn this, but I don't have that much time, how would you go about it? Any ideas?
So the question was like, you did your stuff and said, okay, what I really need is sales, so I get this experience in this small IT company or in Germany, in Munich, and I love Munich, you said. And the other question was, what if at that stage you already had your startup and you of course couldn't like go into employment at the same stage because you're focused on that? How would you go above like really effectively learning sales or improving on your sales skills? What would be your tips and hints?
Yeah, that's a very good question, but I think the answer can also be applied to other areas, not only sales skills, because I'm a big believer in the fact that too many people try to reinvent the wheel or just do learning by doing. And I think you should be learning for doing. I don't know if this is a concept or it makes a lot of sense, but what I mean is there are so many things, methods and knowledge and how things can be done, and sales psychology and all these aspects that you just need to learn. You need to know those things. And once you have this base level of knowledge, and there's so much literature and knowledge out there, blogs, books, everybody shares knowledge for free today. You really need to do the homework and build up that knowledge. And I think once you have that, it's also much more beneficial, or you get much more value out of observing maybe experienced salespeople or talking with them, because you can really reflect on those things that you read and you're not sure how to apply them and so on. But really do the homework and don't try to invent the wheel. And that's
so basically you say first get down into basically also theory, read a lot, try to like get basic know-how and understand the language,
Absolutely.
and then talk to people who are in sales and try to learn from them, and maybe look for opportunities where you can actually learn from and like the real thing and not the theory, and then you can apply the same this language that you learned and the skills that you've acquired in theory. Is there like a follow up on that? Because
Any recommendations on the theory? Any books or blogs that you?
any theory recommendation like?
Yes, actually, for a talk I gave a couple months ago, I put together a list of my favorite 10 books that I got massive value out of. So if you or anyone is interested in that, and there are a couple of books around sales, just send me an email, florian@milestonehunters.com, and I'll send you that list.
And maybe it's on the blog at some stage when the blog is starting as well.
Exactly.
That's a good one. So I'm sorry we have to cut it here, but Florian is here for your questions. But what's also here, and it's not these pizzas that are coming back from there. They're up front. There's some pizza and not supposed to get cold. So I thank you, Florian, for coming. Give him a warm round of applause. I don't know. So a quick one before we go for a pizza. Always 2 minutes for me. Next one, 31st of March, we're going to have Marie-Helene Ametsreiter, who is partner at Speed Invest. She is not a classical entrepreneurial background, but she has a lot of experience in big corporates, and then she has been building up and then heading a telco in Croatia, VIPnet, and she became partner at Speed Invest and is now very active in this part. She's a lot of Munich. She now is a lot in Germany as well there. She's going to be with us and share a bit of a story and a lot about what Speed Invest is up to, which is always very interesting for startups. We're always very happy that Holvi is one of our major sponsors. They currently have a program which is called Invite Your Friends. So sign up to Holvi and you can invite a friend, and both of you get a bonus. It's a very good tool. I use Holvi for Startup Grind, the association, and for myself. It's a very great way of doing my banking. We always want to thank BVideo, who is here with us tonight. As always, they are providing us with the live stream. So if you need a live stream for an event, or you know somebody who needs live stream for corporate events or whatever, they are here to talk to you. They're very easy to handle. It's really good to work with people who are like-minded, and you can work very, very effectively because you don't want to bullshit. It's really not worth it. And of course, we want to thank Sector 5 for hosting us every time. The best co-working space in town. It is like that. It's not promotion, it simply is. And that's basically it.